An Israeli peace activist says the Hamas military leader Ahmed Jabari, assassinated at the start of Israel's offensive, was murdered amid talks on a long-term truce with Israel. Let's now cross live to that activist, Gershon Baskin, for more details. He's in Jerusalem for us. Mr. Baskin, welcome to the show. So you are saying that a draft of a permanent truce agreement already existed. What went wrong then?
Well, the draft was initially drafted about 8 months ago. It was presented to the Israeli side, the Hamas, the Egyptian intelligence, and the United Nations for deliberation. Both the Israeli side and the Hamas side created committees to evaluate it and decided not to decide. Over the last months, the rounds of ceasefire got shorter and shorter, and the intensity of the fighting increased. And I decided, together with my counterpart in Hamas, who we were instrumental in negotiating the prisoner exchange deal that led to the freedom of Gilad Shalit, the Israeli soldier held in captivity by Mr. Jabari, we decided to try and push forward. My Hamas counterpart wrote a new version of the draft. He was presenting it to Hamas leaders. In fact, on Wednesday morning, he was presenting it to Ahmed Jabari himself. I was supposed to receive later that evening the copy of the draft in Arabic for me to deliver to the Israelis who were waiting for it and the Egyptian intelligence.
Why do you think Israel approved the assassination of the Hamas military chief Ahmed Jabari, as you say?
Well, there is a legitimate argument within the Israeli security assessment of whether or not making a truce with Hamas strengthens Hamas at a time when we know that Ahmed Jabari and his colleagues are not peace activists. They don't want peace with Israel. They're committed to Israel's destruction. For tactical reasons, they had decided that a ceasefire was in their interest because each round of violence brings about the death of between 10 and 25 combatants in Gaza, and they didn't see any value when no real damage was happening on the Israeli side from their rocket attacks. So they wanted to at least have a time out where they could reconsider new moves. The Israelis thought, or some Israelis thought, that by having a truce with them would strengthen them. There were people who believe that what we need to do is systematically weaken Hamas so that they will fall out of power. And there are those who believe that we need to create deterrence strong enough so that Hamas won't attack Israel. The attack of rockets to the civilian population in Israel is intolerable by any country, and they needed to take action. I believe personally that we've tried everything. We've assassinated leaders, we've assassinated military commanders, we have put on an economic siege, we have bombed them, we did cast lead, we've tried everything except a dialogue, except an attempt to reach an understanding with mechanisms for verification and for compliance with the involvement of the Egyptian military intelligence. I think it had a chance to work. But now we'll have to postpone it for some time.
And also there's been a lot of speculation about the timing of this offensive. With elections just around the corner in Israel, do you think this is being done for some kind of political advantage, maybe?
I sincerely hope not. That would be extraordinarily cynical. I think we're far enough away from elections still to say that this was not a consideration of the people who made the decision to do this offensive at this time. It might have been. I really hope that it wasn't.
What is Israel's end game here? What are they hoping to achieve there?
Well, I think this is one of the failings in the strategic planning of this operation. I don't know how you define an end game at this point. They stated that the stated aim is to create deterrence. How do you determine when you created enough deterrence? Is it when you killed enough people, or you destroyed enough of the infrastructure, or destroyed enough buildings? I don't know how you define it. And when does the other side decide enough is enough? So I think that what we have here is a bigger chance for escalation, for a ground operation. We have to recall that the Hamas rockets that they shoot into Israel are what we call a statistical weapon. They usually fall in open spaces, but they could fall on a school bus, on a kindergarten, on a supermarket, on an apartment building full of people that could collapse. We could have major casualties. It could happen, and if that happens, we guaranteed have a ground operation, and then we don't know how that ends either. So we have a calculated risk here, which is based primarily on luck, and I think that's a pretty bad strategic call.
Thank you very much indeed for your insight. That was Israeli peace activist Gershon Baskin in Jerusalem.